52 Sketches, Episode 12, musician and activist Eric Dozier.
Welcome to 52 Sketches, a podcast about creativity and creative practices. Here's your host, Rob Head.
Welcome to the 52 Sketches podcast. I am your host, Rob Head. We are here again to talk about living a creative life, creative practices, habits, strategies for making the world a more wonderful, more beautiful place. Today, we are delighted to be speaking with Eric Dozier, musician, recording artist, songwriter, choir director, and race unity activist. He describes himself as a cultural activist, anti-racism educator, and itinerant blues preacher, leveraging the power of music to promote healing, justice, and racial reconciliation. He has served as the musical director for the world-famous Harlem Gospel Choir, the award-winning Children's Theater Company of New York City, and has been a featured artist at the United Nations. He currently serves as a museum educator for the forthcoming National Museum of African American Music in Nashville, Tennessee, and has recently launched the Young People's Freedom Song Initiative, an interactive musical exploration designed to engage young people in revolutionary music making. He is a graduate of Duke University and Duke Divinity School and is currently pursuing a doctorate at the University of Tasmania, researching the effects of Black gospel music on communities outside of the Black church. So welcome, Eric Dozier.
Hey, how y'all doing?
It's been great. It's great. It's so good to have you on the podcast. So just want to check in. How's the pandemic treating you? How's the family? Everybody surviving?
I love questions like that. How's the pandemic treating you?
Yeah, it's a risky thing, because a lot of us have lost people, and it's tough.
Yeah. Well, we've had our share of loss, like most folks, but we're making our way through it as a family has to do, and it's crazy times. Mm-hmm. But when I think about all of this, this too shall pass. And it reminds me of this old spiritual that we used to sing at our church. The storm is passing over, hallelujah. So I think hopefully we're coming out on the other end of that. But I always tell people to just keep singing through it. We'll make our way.
Yeah. Describing it as a storm really helps me frame it with a little bit of maybe there's a silver lining on those clouds somewhere.
Right.
So I want to back up to your childhood and you're growing up. You mentioned coming up in the church, and tell us about where you're from and how you came up and how did you get into a creative life? Was that just part of your existence, or how did that all happen?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small rural town in Tennessee by the name of Bakewell.
Tennessee.
Southeast Tennessee. I'm a country boy. I grew up in the country, and
we hear that.
Yeah. And so, as far as like my creative life beginning, I can't really. It's hard to say when it started because I'd always been surrounded by music. I'll often say that I was. I took my first degree from the Conservatorium of Black Religion and Rhythm, which was the Mount Annie Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. And so, my family is really responsible for my early kind of patchwork music education, which consisted of, playing the piano at that church from probably 5 years old until I left Bakewell, but also being able to, come home. And my dad had he played all kind of music. I remember listening to Memphis Slim play the piano, and that was kind of my first introduction to, wow, what in the world is that instrument? And then, my parents eventually bought me a little plastic piano. And so they would put that Memphis Slim record, Broadway Boogie, on. and I would hit it, man. I would just get on that piano. It was like, it was like just hitting the on button, and I would be banging on that piano. And then one day, I look out our window, and my dad is coming up the driveway uh, with my grandfather's truck, and there's a piano strapped to the back, like a real one,
Oh,
right?
what
So
a
so
gift.
I'm looking at this piano. He gets it into the house, and then he sits down and starts playing. That's the first time I had seen him. I didn't even know he played the piano, right?
Mm, right.
And so I just used to watch his hands and just do what he did. And he played blues, gospel blues is what he played.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's kind of how the piano started. And and then for many years I just, I directed a choir, worked with my mom who was the choir director.
Hmm.
And that's kind of
Mm.
how I got it. Like, I don't really have a
Just
formal music
immersed.
education. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, but and it's funny, like when I describe the black church as a conservatorium, people kind of look
Yeah.
at me like,
Yeah.
but I mean, listen, that institution produced Marvin Gaye, Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight,
Hmm. Mm.
Whitney Houston, Cissy Houston, Donny Hathaway, Billy Preston. I mean, you name it.
Hmm.
Like, how
Hmm.
many other conservatoriums or conservatories can say that they've produced that many genre-defining artists? And then literally on the other end of the spectrum, you had people like Paul Robeson, Jesse Norman, Kathleen Battle,
Mm.
Ciceretta Jones, all these people that were also definitive personalities in classical
Hmm.
music.
Art
They
music.
were, yeah,
Yeah.
art music, right? Fisk Jubilee singers, uh all of the HBCU quartet groups,
Hmm.
the Golden Gate Quartet, Sam Cooke. I mean, like, come on. And so,
It's a
and
proven methodology, let's say.
yeah, I mean, it really is, and says a lot about a theory of music that really has been able to incorporate different styles and genres.
Mm.
And so a lot of my work really spins around helping people to see that it's not just kind of a cultural expression of music, but it is a musical methodology. It is a
Hmm.
particular theory of
Mm.
music that has um, undergirding values. and
Right.
and and my contention is, when we can actually bring these values to bear in multicultural gatherings and
Hmm.
situations, that is the value system that we need to bring the world to a deeper
Mm.
recognition of the oneness of humanity.
Ah,
um
all your work sort of makes sense in that context. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
You,
there's a lot of intersectionality that happens there. It
mm.
happened from growing up in a place where I was singing, he's got the whole world in his hands, and I've got shoes, you got shoes, all of God's children got shoes, or this little light of mine,
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm gonna let it shine. All these different
Hmm.
things, and it just kind of synthesized into this, you know,
Beautiful. You know,
experience.
Eric, you're reminding me of a TED Talk. I'm pretty sure it was Victor Wooten, the bass player,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
was describing his experience. How people are like, he's arguably one of the best bass players in the world.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
and people ask him, how did you learn? And his description is basically he learned music like he learned language.
Right.
It just he was just immersed in it. And he described being, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old, and his older siblings are jamming in his house, and he's 2 or 3, doesn't know what's going on, but they're like, just stick a bass in his hand.
Right.
uh, and
Right.
and he just from there just it wasn't, nobody said this is hard.
No.
They said
Yeah.
join.
Yeah, and nobody said that you have to go through, 4 to 8 years of schooling to know how to do it, right?
Right,
Or
right,
that
right,
or that you had to look at a piece of paper with little black dots on it, and that's
right.
music, because that's
Hmm.
not music. Like, that's a representation of music,
Right,
you
it's
know?
one style of representation of music. Yeah, communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful. So how did you go from your small town? From what I understand from your bio, you went off to Duke University at some point. And what did you study there? Did you did you
Yeah,
continue to do music, or you did other things? How did that
no,
work out?
when I went to Duke, I went there as a biomedical and electrical engineer.
Hmm.
I got
Okay.
accepted into the engineering school there, and which my high school, I was into like computer science and
Hmm.
physics and chemistry, and I was a nerd.
Yeah, yeah. You were in APCS and AP Physics.
All of those. Like I took all of the APs and took 5 years
Uh-huh.
of Latin and all that nonsense.
I only made it to 3, man, before I couldn't. Yeah, yeah. We ran
But
out of other students.
it helps with that SAT though. So
Oh yeah, 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 for sure.
but
And then they notice at Duke.
oh yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And so, like I went there as an engineering student,
Hmm.
and just, I just kind of felt like, wow, that's a lot of time in front of screens and
Mm.
working with numbers, and that I preferred to just do something that was more akin to um, you know, community, and so
Mm.
I switched my major to public policy, with a
Okay.
focus on youth, race, and education,
Mm.
and then also took some religion and theology classes and African American history classes along the way, and
Okay.
end up graduating with that degree, and went on to the divinity school at Duke. And
Mm.
did a master's in theological studies, which focused on comparative religions. I actually wrote my master's thesis on the rise of Islam in America,
Hmm.
and it was interesting, like writing that as a Baha'i in a Methodist divinity school. I always kept doing my music. So throughout my time at Duke, I was the musical director for the Modern Black Mass Choir at Duke University,
Okay.
and
Modern
uh,
Black Mass Choir.
yeah, and
Okay.
so
So that was
we
like Sunday services.
Well, now we did things all over the city, and
Oh, I see. Okay.
which eventually led to us getting a grant from the president of the university to go to the Czech Republic, after kind of after everything over there kind of opened up, like in the 90s.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that was really an experience that really kind of fortified a particular trajectory for me.
Mm.
We were there, and we were doing this song that um, my great grandmother taught me. Hold on just a little while longer, everything will be all right. And we were
Mm.
singing that song in a cathedral in Prague, or it was in Prague, and we were singing this song, and it was all African American choir,
Uh-huh.
college
Uh-huh.
kids,
Right.
and so we sing this song, and the way the song is a really simple song,
Hmm.
but it says, hold on just a little while longer, everything will be all right. And so we sing this song. This lady comes up, Czech lady comes up,
Uh-huh.
and didn't speak English, but we had an interpreter there. She
Hmm.
takes off her rosary and she hands it to me.
Mm.
And she's and before we perform the song, I always talk about how my great grandmother taught it to me. She says,
Mm.
I know your grandmother. And what she was saying is, I know what your grandmother was singing about. And
Mm.
she gave me this rosary that she had held for
Mm.
40 years, from the time that they closed the churches until that day.
Mm.
And she said, I know your grandmother. And that's when I began to really realize that this music,
Mm.
that I'd been reared in, really is for it's for the world.
It speaks in a universal way
It
to the human
does.
condition.
Oh, it
Yeah.
it really does, and and it's accessible beyond language, and so that's
Mm.
that's really for me where really understanding the oneness of humanity was really solidified for me.
Mm.
when I realized the depth of the communication that was, it wasn't just the communication between me and that older Czech woman that was there,
Hmm.
but I facilitated a conversation between my ancestors all the way through to her.
Mm.
And so it was something that was even beyond what I could have done.
Mm.
I really felt like, and I always tell people, I never say, "Oh yeah, I'm from Chattanooga or I'm from Nashville," so the big cities in Tennessee. I always say I'm
Right.
from
Right.
Bakewell. I always introduce them to my family, because my
Uh-huh.
family really put that in me before even having this encounter with this woman who had lived through the shutting down of the churches and lived through religious persecution and all these
Right.
different things.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something almost mystical about the power of music from Southeast Tennessee to speak to, a woman in, sort of post, what do they call it?
A
The
post Iron Curtain,
Yeah, post Iron Curtain,
yeah.
Prague. Yeah.
Right, right,
Wow.
right. Yeah.
And there was I can only imagine. I have traveled a little bit in Eastern Europe, and just the collective cultural trauma from that period is, not to mention all the traumas before it, right?
Right,
It is was palpable,
right, right.
and I can imagine how electric black gospel music was in that moment.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I mean they love that music, but
mm,
I think it was so much more than that. I think that they just resonated with the story.
mm,
I mean, because
yeah.
it is I liken it to the story of Moses bringing people into the promised land and liberating them from captivity in Egypt. I mean, that
Mm,
if there's any story that is indicative of or that could be referred to as the meta narrative of black people in America, it would be Go Down Moses. Tell old
mm,
Pharaoh, let my people go. um,
yeah.
and uh, and there are so many people that because we live in a world that is really fraught with oppression and exploitation and so many things, that there are so many people that resonate with that story. I mean, when you think about even the state of the world right now, the disparities between the wealthy and the poor, and all
Mm,
of the racism that is manifesting itself globally, as well as locally. I mean,
hmm.
there are so many people that identify with "Let My People Go,"
Yeah.
as opposed to, hey, everything is cool, everything is great. You know what I'm
Everything is
saying?
fine.
And
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
so, and I think that what black music carries is it just carries this particular balance of joy and pain and hope and despair and s- you know uh
Mm,
sorrow and jubilation, that it really is more um offers a great descriptor of the human condition. Just does.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So, having had this realization and this sort of epiphany that this music can speak universally, where do you go from there? Like, how did you get from there to, I don't know, the children's theater in New York City, or what did you do next? Like, how did you take that
Yeah.
realization and turn it into some kind of career?
Well, it was funny. Like I moved to South Carolina
Okay.
uh for a while after I graduated from
Duke.
after I finished Duke, and went to work at the Louis Gregory Baha'i Institute.
You're our
Uh
second guest that's done a stint there. Kevin Genus was our first
oh,
first podcast guest, and he spent a year there. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Now, I was down there for quite a bit, helping with some community development type of things.
Hmm. Okay.
I started working there, and then after I left there, I went to Columbia, South Carolina,
Okay.
and I got a job working with the organization Big Brothers Big Sisters. That, yeah, I mean, I'm sure most of your
Yeah.
audience has heard of them.
Hmm.
And And so my boss comes in one day and she says, "Well, Eric, you look really bored at this job." I said, "Well, okay." And she just asked me, what I like to do more with my music and the agency, because one of the issues that these agencies, like these matching agencies have a lot of times is when everybody wants a younger kid.
Hmm.
And the teenagers, if they come into the system too late, they kind of they don't get paired as easily as a younger child would get
Right.
paired. And
Yeah.
so
Okay.
she asked me if I would like to do something with my music.
This is sort of in the tween ages, or
Yeah,
what?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it was, these were teenagers. I would say anywhere from, you know, probably 13 to 17 or 18, like,
Okay.
junior high school kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
And after that, I said, well, sure. And so we wrote a grant to do this thing called the Dream Builders Club. And we took the older kids and gathered them and helped them write music and put together a musical that was a composite sketch, a creative composite sketch of their lives that was centered around four kids. And so all of their stories were incorporated
Mm.
and made a part of the lives of these four kids that were on this journey growing up. And we
Hmm.
helped them. We composed original music. They did choreography. They developed the script. And with the help of myself and another colleague who was a more theatrical person, a theater
Okay.
person.
Uh-huh.
And then it just kind of started from there. And after that, I partnered with a couple of friends of mine, Carol Williams and Dilcy Davis,
Okay.
to start One Human Family music workshops, and which is a national choir chapter organization that uses these forms of African American choral music to facilitate frank and honest conversations about race in America.
Mm.
And so we started that organization, and it grew, and we took a couple of international trips to Europe, and then I
Mm.
ended up as that organization was evolving, ended up going to New York after meeting Mayor Mansouri, who started the Children's Theater Company, and that's ended up going there to work with them.
Okay.
Got an offer to work with the Harlem Gospel Choir. Um, and it just kind of blossomed from there, from
Wow.
my boss at Big Brothers Big Sisters saying, well, maybe you should try to do something more with your music. And what it did is it actually gave me an incubator to explore ways to bring my
Your
creative
gifts to
side,
the,
my music,
yeah.
my gifts to bear on
Yeah.
racism in America, which eventually grew into kind of a career doing that.
Right. Right. Well, so
So you
those
know
two
what?
things are
By the
sort of
way,
inextricable. Yeah. Okay.
my
Go ahead.
some folks have come in. Uh, they
All
they
right.
they just they just kind of walked into the room. Say hi, Worthington. That's my
Hello.
daughter. And my wife is
Beautiful.
here, and they asked me to pop in and do something, and we're at the Baha'i school that is happening in with the kids in Nashville. We can't let go of Nashville. But would you mind if we shared a little song with you all really quickly?
That sounds great. Don't let us interrupt that. Yeah.
Okay. So let me see here. Let me turn this. So the this is a song, just so that this also kind of ties into what I said earlier about growing up and in Bakewell. One of the first songs that you learn growing up in African American church is Jesus Loves the Little Children. And so I want to share that with you all, and we'll see what happens, okay? You ready, Worthington? Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. One more time. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. There you go. That's a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
But
Yeah.
that's
Eric,
my little girl Worthington, and she sings
beautiful.
quite a bit with me.
How old is Worthington?
She is 8.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
That's such a great age.
it
It's
is.
like there's a sense of like a maturing mind, while they're still like super playful as children,
Right.
it's
Right.
really
I know.
fascinating.
Yeah. So we go out and we ride bikes and play quite a bit, and then I have her. I've been doing a lot of consulting work lately with
Hmm.
corporations, companies around diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Hmm.
and so I always kind of have her pop in because I integrate music heavily into that work as well.
Yeah.
And so as a surprise guest, I always bring her in to help me kind of demonstrate how, really how you imprint these values on children, because she could
Yeah.
be listening to any kind of music. But like I teach her freedom songs. I teach her songs by Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder and
Mm.
all of these artists, these cultural activists and creative philosophers, and that's how she learns. She learns that
Yeah.
through that medium. So and folks are always surprised, when she comes into the room. And she also kind of shares, I give her opportunity to share what those songs mean to her, just to show, you can start to imprint these things on your
Mm.
children early as well. Because see, this is the thing, these children that we're looking at right now,
Mm.
as the
Hmm.
song says, red and yellow, black and white, these are the children that end up growing up managing these corporations, sitting in
Hmm.
positions of leadership. And if they haven't really been engaged in thinking about these particular issues, then when they're
Hmm.
45, 50 years old running this corporation, and you say, well, hey, our corporation is not diverse enough, we need to do something about, they're starting from scratch.
Right. They're stymied. They're like,
Yeah. So what
where
do
do you
you
start?
expect?
Yeah.
We haven't had a conversation with our children about this,
Yeah.
with our kids. It's not in the schools. The only place that they can really have it is in the home.
Yeah.
And then we expect them to be just, and we expect them to be equitable, and we expect them to promote diversity when they haven't had a conversation about it all of their
Right.
lives. They're living
Mm.
in segregated communities,
Hmm.
uh, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and have a very segregated cultural experience. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Eric, a couple of things on my mind. Well, one is a couple of weeks ago in a presentation you gave, you said something that really touched me, which was that the spirit doesn't descend without
yeah,
song.
yeah,
And I think about that a lot with in my professional life. There's such a sort of a dearth of of any kind of like it's almost like the humanity is drained out of us when we walk into the office,
whew,
and
man,
it's painful, right? And so the power of using music as a way to get through some of these ideas that are, it's hard to have just a straight up, intellectual mind to mind. You can't have a change of heart talking to somebody's mind. you
right,
know?
right,
and,
right, right,
you
right,
know,
right, right.
and so that really touched me. So the other thing is, I want to just tell you how touching it is to have an artist who has performed all over the world, and been on stage with, whoever, Nelson Mandela, and then, sings for her daughter's, Sunday school class or whatever. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see music that's so integrated into life instead of being sort of put into a box or on a pedestal.
Right, right. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, you
and
know what, man? That was a thing. I think again, I attribute my growing up in Bakewell and in that incubator, man, because
mm,
my mom always told me, the message that I got from my folks about music is that, son, make your music, make sure your music is useful for the community.
mm,
It
yeah,
wasn't go out and be a star and make money from doing this and that. It was always what can the community do with your music?
yeah,
And so much of who I am, uh, we're taught this kind of rugged individualism in the United
yeah,
States,
yep,
particularly,
yep,
as if we can actually live isolated from everything else around us. Like it's just, I mean, it's utterly impossible to do that. And
right,
so, whatever experiences we have, really go to shape who we are and who we will become. And I
mm,
think that the test is to really become aware of how those things shape us and really take on our own agency in, okay, so now I know this is where I came from and these are the things that have manifested in me thus far. Now, how can I begin to shape those things myself?
yeah, yeah.
And
Eric, I want to
Yeah,
ask you about your particular background is probably unique among the folks that we've talked with on the podcast so far, in the sense that you sort of grew up immersed in your art, um, and I don't know that you see it as a separate thing from your daily life, but
right.
do you have, regular practices, daily practices, maybe? Like, how do you care for yourself, your voice, your creativity? Are there things that you feel like you need to do or have in your life so that you can, have the creative freedom to feel like, hey, I'm gonna write a new piece, or I'm gonna,
Yeah. Well,
go out there in front of a choir and direct them, and like, how do you keep yourself in a place where you feel like, yeah, I can do this
yeah,
creatively?
that's that I think that for me that I always kind of have been hard on myself about not keeping a regular routine
Mm,
as far as my music is concerned.
hmm
What I do on a consistent basis is that I may not rehearse on a consistent basis, but I am performing on a consistent basis. I mean, even since the pandemic, man, I think I've performed more this year, through through Zoom and these different calls and in front of so many different people. And so
Mhm.
that kind of helps me kind of stay current and keeps the chops up. But one of the things that I have consistently done is I'm constantly observing the world around me and studying
Mm,
and trying to um, keep myself in tune with the spirit of the age.
yeah.
And that's through my faith. I've been a Baha'i for the last uh, uh, quarter of a decade. I mean, quarter of a
Mm,
century,
essentially,
not a quarter
yeah.
of a decade, but quarter of a century. And so that I engage regularly with the writings and teachings and prayers of the Baha'i faith.
Mhm,
I'm always reading about current events and trying to understand what's happening in the world, so that my content remains relevant and useful, as my
mhm.
mom would always kind of say,
Yeah,
what use is that music? Can we use it? And
right. Huh.
and then as far as like I guess developing greater proficiency with my instruments, meaning my voice and my keyboard.
Mhm.
If you want to learn to sing, you sing.
Right, right.
If you want to learn to play better, then you seek out mentors and other folks. And so I've never had really a consistent regimen of like piano lessons and things like that. But the way I've learned to play is that I find artists that I like listening to,
Mhm.
and I learned to play their songs.
Right,
I grew up learning how to play the piano, listening to Ray Charles, listening
right.
to Memphis Slim, listening to Nat King Cole, and all of my piano guys, listening to Billy Preston and Donny Hathaway,
Mm,
and training my ear to hear what they were playing and then play it, lick for
right.
lick, and
Okay.
and I think that that also comes from that black church model of really accompaniment and apprenticeship. That's how you learn it. Like
Right.
that you learn under the gun. So when you're sitting at that piano, like literally, if you're
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
at that piano on Sunday morning, and grandmama comes in and she says, well, yeah, hey, baby, I wrote this song on the way to church. I'm just gonna start singing it. I want you to play. You learn how to play in every key.
Yep.
You learn how to play under pressure. You learn, you kind of just take in this way of
Being.
playing that is
Yeah.
in the moment, and it teaches
Mhm.
you immediacy, because the thing is that if the spirit is moving in a particular way, as an artist that has grown up in a very spirited black church experience,
Uh-huh.
you learn to move when the spirit says move.
Mhm.
So it's anyone who is acquainted with those cultural traditions, you'll know from that I'm not rare. Like that's, I mean, I've taken it and done a particular thing with my understanding of those traditions,
Right.
but
But
you
that is
know
the tradition. The
that
tradition
is
is
yeah that
spontaneity and
yeah, it is
improvisational
like that.
skill.
That's
Yeah.
that's part of it. It's call
Yeah.
and response. It's improvisation. It's immediacy and spontaneity.
Mm.
That's what it is. Those are I refer to those things as cultural values. Like there are cultural values that sit at the base of that musical practice that
Mhm.
also will tell you a lot about the people that evolved them.
Right.
And so my practice, oh man, I still carry those things over into my practice. So if I see, and like now is what's so great about gospel and soul and blues is that you can go on YouTube now and see folks that have broken those traditions down and that can teach you certain things. And so
Mhm.
like I might find a piano player that I like, and I will, I'll make a playlist of I literally have a playlist of piano lessons.
Mm.
And so that's how I get my mentorship, is I find these artists that I like and I learn how to play these things. And the other thing about it is that there's this integration of things that also takes place, is that you listen to these various artists and you just learn how to integrate them and evolve your
Mm.
own style.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Eric, this
Yeah.
is so fascinating to me because my family comes from the classical, what would be called the classical tradition.
Right.
The art music from the European tradition, and
Right.
the methodology could not be more antithetical, right?
Right.
The way that classical music has calcified, and this is great schools are getting over this, but for
Hmm.
the most part, the classical world is one in which you do not even have the right to think about performing until you're in the top 1%,
Right.
of all artists,
Hmm.
and so it's not experiential, it's not immediate, it's it's okay,
Right.
let's talk about how you need to study for 10 years before you're worthy.
Right,
And
right. Well, and
yeah.
and you think about that because when I took this uh this started this PhD program at the University of Tasmania,
Mhm.
they gave me this basically you got to walk through a particular gate, and that gate
Yeah.
was not even on my that well, that gate
Right.
wasn't even on my radar, because I
Ye-
didn't study the old dead
Yeah.
white dudes. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But this is the thing, is that when I started to study music,
Mm-hmm.
of the people that, folks consider to be the greats in
Uh-huh.
the
Uh-huh.
classical realm, you realize that at the beginning a lot of that music was improvisational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
J.S.
know,
Bach, Mozart,
yeah,
Beethoven,
yeah,
they
you
were
think
all
like that.
at the
Yeah,
time
yeah,
improvisational. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so they would probably, be like, why are you trying to freeze me in time like that?
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I totally agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, is so how did we get to the point that we have gotten to, even in
Yeah.
classical music, right? Where your worth is really kind of gauged based on whether or not you can replicate what these folks have done.
Yeah. Eric, I'm gonna dive in here for a second because
Oh,
this
please do.
yeah.
Go on, jump in
So
there.
uh as I understand it, one of the things that epiphanies that I've had is that the calcification of the classical tradition has everything to do with the rise of nationalism and racism in the 19th century. So,
Bruh.
yeah.
Yeah, hey,
So,
you know what? Let's just go on and get it. Let's get it. Let's get to it.
so there's this notion, and Wagner might be the poster child of this, but there's this
Oh
notion
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
the supremacy of the German tradition. So Austrian music, meaning
Right,
Mozart,
right,
Beethoven, Haydn,
right,
and everybody before and after. And then and the even within Europe, there was this notion that German music was superior to French music and English music and Italian
right,
music. It was more
right,
serious and more moral and more correct and more right. And the rise, and and of course every nation had their own flavor of why theirs was superior, but the Germans really took it to the next level. And
right,
it really ties into disasters of the early 20th century. All of this philosophical idea that there's a racial component to like human greatness really is tied in with this idea that therefore we need to lionize a certain period of German music and say this is the pinnacle of music, this is the pinnacle of human achievement, this is the best that can ever be.
right,
And disaster ensues
right.
from there.
Well, I mean, I think that you're absolutely correct. Now, when you think about what white supremacy is,
Hmm.
white supremacy is a philosophy that says that everything that emanates from people who have been racialized as white,
Hmm. Hmm.
because there is no one place that white people come from.
Right.
Just like there is no one place that black and brown people come from.
Hmm.
Europe, Asia, and Africa that's one landmass. So if you
Yeah.
wanted to, you could walk from the tip of Africa to China. You could get
Hmm.
there by foot. And if you wanted to swim from Africa to Europe, it's 11 miles across the Straits of Gibraltar, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So who's to say, well, what belongs to who,
Right.
when we know that the Moors were in Spain for over 700 years,
Hmm. Hmm.
when they were responsible for preserving,
Hmm.
the,
Yeah.
ancient Greek and Roman text and all these
Yep.
different things, when when the Western church was burning books and
Hmm.
killing
Hmm.
people.
Yep. Well,
And
that's a
and
great
so,
example because
yeah,
Spanish music in the classical tradition, Spanish music is sort of shoved aside as
right,
they were obsessed with like stringed instruments and lutes and
right.
guitars and whatever. It's sort of a side note
Well, it
to the
is, and then
yeah.
when you think about also, if you have groups of people that essentially, came from the western coast of Africa,
Hmm. Hmm.
northwestern coast of Africa into Europe,
Hmm.
and really brought light
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
dark ages,
To the Dark Ages. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the dark ages. And when you read histories of classical music, it's as if Islam and Muslim musical traditions had no had no influence on
Right.
this art.
And they
Like when I've read, yeah,
clearly did, and especially in
clearly,
Spain. Yeah. and
right,
and
like,
and to an extent in Italian,
right,
the vocal tradition. All
yeah.
that.
The only way that those things get erased is because we are living in a system
That erases them.
so that erases them, just
Yeah.
it totally erases the contributions, and then exalts one subset of the human family over the rest of us.
Hmm.
And that is totally not acceptable. You
Mm.
look across genres. You look at, say Black music and Black people in country music.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the
Right.
banjo evolved from a West African instrument, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
one of the primary staples of country music, the banjo, is a
Yep.
West African instrument. So
Mm-hmm.
how can you even come to the conclusion that Black people had no part in the evolution of that music, when we even know that country music evolved from, a lot of it kind of evolved from these, Black string bands that were traveling around the
Yeah.
South, all
Yeah.
over Texas,
And
Tennessee.
as recently as right now, this year,
Yeah.
anytime a Black artist makes waves in the country music world, people are freaking out about it. Like it's
Yeah,
this,
I mean, like that music
aberration,
doesn't. Yeah, like that doesn't belong to us too, right?
Right, right, right.
When
Well,
we
yeah,
when
yeah,
and that's the thing, is that we have to figure out a way to kind of break out of this particular way of racially reasoning about things,
yeah.
but also realize that, how do you do that but still acknowledge the fact that we still live in a global racial hierarchy,
Hmm.
because you can't
Yeah,
you can't separate that way of even a historical read of classical music from
hmm.
colonialism and imperialism.
Right. They're
It's all mixed.
inextricable.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
inextricable,
yeah.
because if a race is superior, then their cultural production is superior, right?
Right. Yeah, it's
That
problematic. I don't know if you're familiar with like El Sistema in Venezuela, or
mm-mm.
which has had incredible
Oh
results
yes. Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
developing.
yeah.
Dudamel, who conducts the Los Angeles Philharmonic, is
Right.
probably the most famous conductor in the world. He came out of that system, but it's interesting because they've created this brilliant sort of system of training musicians,
Right.
but it's also they're embracing the colonialist model, and it's complicated, right? It's like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, yeah. Well, okay, Eric, it's been such a delight to spend
Oh
this hour
yeah.
with you. I do want to ask you, like,
Right.
what is your typical week looks like? What is your
Man.
what kind of life have you built for yourself, and what are you working on? What are you trying to get done in the next year or two?
Man. Well, this man, the whole kind of COVID pandemic thing
Yeah,
has really, just like everybody else,
modified.
we get modified, and everybody has
Yeah.
kind of had to retool. I'm still
Hmm.
involved in writing music. I've been a part of our composer in a musical that was developed by the Children's Theater Company around the story of a slave that actually mailed himself to freedom with the help of a white minister. His name was Henry Box Brown.
True story.
Yeah, true story. He was he conspired with a enlisted a white minister to
Uh-huh.
help him mail himself out of slavery to freedom.
Mm.
And so we have been working on that, and now we're working on, it was on tour, won got critical acclaim at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and
Oh,
people
nice.
people are beginning to take notice, and so we're evolving and moving that project ahead. And so there are a lot of things that are going on. Right now I'm just trying to figure out how to manage all of this stuff.
Mm.
I actually need a new band member, that that just does that, helps
Yeah,
me
yeah. You
manage
need
these
a assistant,
relationships.
personal assistant or
Right,
something.
right.
Yeah.
It's time. I
Don't we?
think it's time.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and it is the powerful experience of interacting with your music. And yeah, yeah. I don't know. You want to play us out?
Yeah, man, I'll play you out. So you know what? I will share. Let me share this one a little bit of this one here.
All right.
So this one goes, and everybody knows this. So it goes, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land was made for you and me. There you go.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope your work continues to go splendidly.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And thank you for having me, man. This is
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah.
lovely.
Great. All right.
The 52 Sketches podcast is a product of 52 Sketches, makers of earlywords.io, daily, private, stream of consciousness writing to clear your mind and unlock your creativity.